We're working on future generations of this. Steam Deck is kind of the culmination of everything that we learned making hardware up to that point with Steam Controller, Steam Machines, Valve Index, and Steam Lab. So we took all of those things that we learned and said, okay, here's Steam Deck as one package. And in that same token, we're going to take the learnings that we have from Steam Deck and move it forward to future new hardware as well. So we have things that we're not talking about today. That's a quote from Lawrence Yang. If you don't know who he is, he wears lots of hats over at Valve, including the Steam Deck. He and some other Valve employees recently sat down with the folks over at PressStart.au because they were in the area for PAX Australia, where they unveiled that they were bringing the Steam Deck to Australia finally after more than 2 years of waiting. So first of all, what took them so long to bring the Steam Deck to Australia? I'm sorry, but it's a very boring answer, and that's contracts. Australia was always on our list, and we had to make sure that from a certification standpoint, and the answer is really boring, it just took until now to get everything lined up. So we needed to have logistics and shipping and a third-party logistics partner and all of that lined up before we could ship officially here. And now we can. If it could have been sooner, it would have been sooner. We wanted to be able to sell it through Steam. And part of that is that we're hoping that this investment that we put into the infrastructure would allow us to sell future hardware in Australia much faster. We just want to do it once and do it correctly and pave the way for future things. The first part of that quote is from Lawrence Yang. Again, the second part is from Valve hardware engineer, and hopefully I don't ruin this, Yazan Edelhayat. And if I butchered their name, I'm really sorry. First up, of course, Valve wants to sell it directly through Steam. Doing so will keep the price lower, as, local brick and mortars would probably need to either push the price up or force Valve to sell it cheaper so that the brick and mortars can actually make money on a sale, especially since these stores don't really sell PC games anymore. Sure, you can buy Steam cards in a lot of stores, but selling a device like this in a brick and mortar means the customers are not likely to come back to pick up games later on down the road. They'll just buy things directly from Steam. This is followed up by Yang again, confirming that there is more hardware coming down the pipe. Now that Australia is part of our hardware shipping regions, now that we're all set up, it'll be for all of our future hardware as well. So what hardware could they be talking about? I have ideas, but before I drop my ideas about what I think Valve needs to do in order to make those ideas succeed, leave a comment down below that like button with your ideas. What do you think Valve should make? I think we've got three main categories. We've got handhelds, we have VR, and then we have what I'm going to call a console, though that's in quotes because if it's from Valve, it's not really a console, even if it feels like one. So let's start with, why did it stop? Hey, what happened to my camera? What do you mean? What do you mean, what do I mean? No one can see me. Oh, shoot. I don't know. Hold on, let me figure this out. Well, that didn't work. I don't know what I did. How do I fix this? Why are you asking me? You've been editing my videos for ages. Okay, but I don't know what I'm doing. I thought that you knew that since you're me. Well, first of all, I'm not you, you're me. And second of all, if you're gonna keep this job, you have to learn how to edit videos. I'm signing you up for Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online community with loads of classes led by industry experts from film, illustration, how to make video games, and more. They have learning paths, which are curated, organized class collections that take you step by step through mastering a brand new skill. I'm currently partnered with Skillshare, and I'm learning how to make YouTube videos from Marquez Brownlee, but they also have classes where you can explore drawing in Procreate, which is one of my all-time favorite iPad apps. They have classes on how to grow your YouTube channel. That's one that I absolutely need to check out. You can discover the science and art of drawing, which I'll probably watch after I watch the Procreate one. Or perhaps you want to make money online with business and marketing fundamentals, or learn how to paint with watercolors. Skillshare has so much that you can learn. So if you're a curious person and you want to expand your knowledge on just about any topic, you should explore Skillshare. And the first 500 people to join Skillshare using my link down below get 1 month of premium free. So click that link in the description and start learning Skillshare today. Okay, let's start with handhelds. The Steam Deck launched in February of 2022. I was lucky enough to get an early review unit sent to me by Valve. I had it for, like a whole 24 hours before launch. And you know what I found out that day? That the Steam Deck could effectively run my entire Steam library with little to no issues. Was everything perfect? No. Did every game run? Of course not. But since none of these games were actually made with Steam Deck in mind, it was pretty damn impressive that it was able to work at all, let alone as well as it did. And now more than 2 years has come and gone, and the power profile of the Steam Deck has not really improved unless you count the slight boost that we got with the OLED Steam Deck. But the experience of using the Steam Deck has improved significantly. Here we are 32 months later, and some of the more demanding games are now having issues running well on the Steam Deck, and that shouldn't be a huge surprise. It's a handheld. It has to be small. It has to be light. It has to manage heat. It has to manage battery. So any games that require more and more power, devices like the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally X or the Lenovo Legion Go, they're going to have trouble keeping up. But that's just for the newest and most power-hungry game. The Steam Deck is still amazing for the vast majority of games that you can pick up on Steam. And let's be honest, if you're someone that is trying to get as many ray-traced pixels onto a screen at once, handheld PCs probably aren't a really attractive option for you. But for most people, I think that handhelds are really great, even if you don't bring them with you when you go places. Just being able to move from room to room with the same device and not occupy the TV, or being chained to a desk that doesn't need to be plugged in all the time, is a huge game changer. The Nintendo Switch showed us this almost 8 years ago, and the Steam Deck does just about everything the Nintendo Switch does. They just do it better. But as time marches on and new games require more and more power or more and more resources, I can see future hardware that Yang is talking about here being the next Steam Deck. So let's talk about the next Steam Deck and what I would like to see Valve change about the current one outside of just more power. But first, let's talk about what I wouldn't change about the Steam Deck. And number one, it's gotta be the form factor. I have a lot of handheld devices here in the NerdNest, and none of them are anywhere near as comfortable to hold in your hands for long periods of time as the Steam Deck. Now, every time I say that, I of course get people leaving comments that say that they don't agree with me, and that's fine. We don't have to agree on everything, and if we did, this would be a really boring conversation. But for me, the Steam Deck's ergonomics are dead on, nearly perfect. I also don't want Valve to ditch the trackpads. Even if I don't use them nearly as much as I thought that I would, the fact that it's there when I do feel the need to use them, I'm always really happy that they're there. And their inclusion means way more older games are playable on Steam Deck. In fact, I have an entire video about how you can play old school real-time strategy games on the Steam Deck using Steam input. I will leave a link in the description down below so that you can check that out after you watch this video. Okay, so what would I actually change? I think after using the Ally and the Ally X, one thing that I would change is the D-pad. The D-pad on the Steam Deck is good, but it could absolutely be better. Recently, I've been playing a game called Iron Meat, which is a Contra-style game. It's really fun. It has lots of replay value. You should absolutely check it out. It's a great game. But playing it on the Steam Deck, I just decided to use the joystick instead of the D-pad because the Deck's D-pad is really, really bad for that kind of game. Another change that I'd like to see is another bezel shrink. When the OLED Steam Deck was released about a year ago, Valve kept the same form factor, but they made the bezels of the screen quite a bit smaller, moving it from a 7-inch screen up to a 7.4-inch screen. I don't know anything about how big bezels need to be, but if Valve can make them even smaller than they already are, I think that that would be great, especially as quite a few games that I've played on the Steam Deck have text that is just really hard to read on that 7.4-inch screen. And before you comment about the magnification options on the Steam Deck, trust me, I'm aware. I've used them, but I prefer to not have to use them, if that makes any sense. Speaking of the screen, I don't really care if we get a resolution bump on the Steam Deck, but if you are increasing the size of the screen through my imaginary bezel shrink, then perhaps pushing up to 1440 by 900 would be warranted. I think 800p is fine, but a small improvement wouldn't hurt. Next up, we know that they've improved the battery when they've shifted to the OLED, but They took what they learned there and they are now paying it back to the LCD deck. Here's what Valve had to say about that. I think the biggest thing is the tight relationship the hardware and the software guys have. We do a lot of testing and optimizing, and also our relationship with AMD. Since we have a custom chip, we have a lot of levers that we can pull and a lot of very specific changes that we can ask for. We really do own the entire stack, all the way down to the firmware, to the software, which is something I think is unique about Valve and Steam Deck, but kind of hard to emulate for sure. We're continuously investing in even first generation Steam Deck LCD. So we're constantly pushing software updates, firmware updates, all the improvements that we're able to get out of the old OLED Steam Deck. We always try and port it back to the LCD. So we have SteamOS 3.6 coming out soon. It's going to have, depending on this game, depending on this scenario, like between 10 and 15% extra battery life for LCD, which is crazy. We were talking about this on the NerdNest podcast, and Carrie, aka the Fox, explained how they can pull this off.
They're improving battery life of the Steam Deck LCD by 10 to 15% with the upcoming 3.6 update.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
how are they doing that?
There's only a few ways that they can do that. So I don't know if you guys remember the old video that I did when the Steam Deck OLED came out, where the power ratio on the Steam Deck OLED and LCD is exactly the same. It's basically 45-55, meaning it will boost itself over its TDP for 45% of the time up to a certain limit. On the LCD, that went up to like 28 watts. On the OLED, it was pretty much at 22 watts. So they dialed that back a whole bunch. There was this real hard wall. And it was at every watt. So if you were to put Steam Deck OLED at 5 watt versus the Steam Deck LCD at 5 watt, the LCD would just get way better performance. People are like, what's going on here? You are using more power on the Steam Deck LCD on 5 watt because of how it's working. So one of the ways that you can do that is literally just align Steam Deck LCD with the Steam Deck OLED and you create the same paradigm.
Okay, moving on from handhelds, let's talk about VR. We've been watching Deckard slowly come into focus, with data miners like Sadly It's Bradley finding breadcrumbs left behind by Valve related to their follow-up to the Valve Index. I will say that Valve Index required a beefy PC, it was expensive to boot, and I personally hope that if Valve is in fact bringing out a new VR headset, number one, I hope that it's standalone with the option to plug into a PC for more power. I also hope that it doesn't have any extra crap that you have to have set up around your room. Like, inside out tracking is pretty great these days, as shown to us by MetaQuest, PSVR 2, and Apple's Vision Pro. The need to put up trackers throughout your room for the best experience, I get, but it's a speed bump that to me adds just a little bit too much friction to playing a game. Of course, I say this as somebody who never actually got a chance to try the Valve Index, so perhaps I'd be singing a different tune if I had played games on that system. If you're an old school Index user, let me know all of the reasons that I'm wrong in the comments down below. Back to those breadcrumbs though. We've seen things like eye tracking, face tracking. Valve recently updated how Steam works in VR. Last year, Valve announced Steam Link was now available in some VR headsets, which is really cool because it allows you to play Steam VR games wirelessly. Prior to that, you had to install certain software on your computer, or you had to have a wire. And the rumors that Valve Index is no longer in production and the fact that the Index VR kit is completely out of stock seems to lend some authenticity to all of those breadcrumbs that data miners are finding. When interviewed by Korean gaming outlet This Is Game, Valve product designer Greg Coomer had this to say about VR. Though keep in mind this is translated from Korean, so some nuance could have been lost here. Here's what he said. I can definitely say that we are continuing to develop VR headsets. Recently, Valve had a lot of expertise in VR devices, and we believe in the medium of VR and VR games. We want VR games to remain open to the PC platform rather than being exclusive to a specific platform. We are continuing to develop with this belief in mind. I will say that of the three options for future hardware, this is the one that I find, well, for me, to be the least interesting. I'm ready to be proven wrong. If Valve puts out a new VR headset, I will be picking one up. But VR is something that always seems incredibly cool at first, But then that initial wow factor wears off and it's kind of a chore to put on. I can't speak for everyone else, but whenever I break out my PSVR 2, I have to like clear space. I have to make sure I have room to play. And almost every time I know I'm going to get interrupted shortly after I start playing. So then I end up starting to weigh my options and usually I just decide not to play. But if Deckard can be played without tethering to anything and I can take the headset down to my home gym where I have extra room and goof off in there, well, that might change things because then I wouldn't have to set things up and it might make it way more, might make me way more likely to play games on a VR headset. Okay, on to the third possibility and the thing that I am most excited for, at least the thing that I'm hoping for the most, and that's got to be the set-top box that plugs into your TV and plays your Steam library. Every time I bring this up, somebody posts a comment that that's a Steam Deck. You can already do that. And I know, you're not wrong. I get exactly what you're saying. But if we go back to the beginning of the video, I did point out that some modern games are having a hard time running on handheld PCs. And of course they are. Handheld PCs, they have to keep the power low in order to manage heat. They have to keep the power low in order to manage the battery. They have to have a battery. They have to have a screen. What if you could what if Valve just made a box that could do everything that a Steam Deck could do, but with a higher power ceiling, a higher volume, as now, it takes up a whole lot more space. It makes it easier to manage that heat. It makes it easier to manage that power. I'm thinking something similar to the size of an Xbox Series X or a PS5 or PS5 Pro. Ship this with SteamOS and an updated Steam controller, not you. But ship these things and I think that it would fly off the shelves. Sure, I could build something myself, but there are a lot of people out there that have zero interest in building a PC. But they have a lot of interest in playing games on a TV, and that's a lot of money that Valve is currently leaving on the table. And it would be so damn easy for them to pick that money up. Cue up the comments that Valve already tried this once with Steam machines, and you are right, they did, but things are very different now. Valve has now shown that gaming on Linux works incredibly well, far better than I ever thought it would, thanks to Proton. Valve has also shown that they have the ability to build really solid hardware, and they've shown that they will support it. And it's obvious that it's working, otherwise we wouldn't see non-stop competition for the Steam Deck from companies like Asus and Lenovo. Of course, right now, there are also a lot of mini PCs out there that you can get that have an 8840U chipset. That's very similar to the Z1 Extreme chipset that's in the Ally or the Legion Go. But Valve are currently the kings of efficiency with the Vango chipset, at least when it comes to the handheld gaming PC space. And I would love to see what they could do with more powerful chips, or perhaps a dedicated GPU that can really push pixels on a 4K screen, and a system that has shader caching like the Steam Deck does, which is why games like Elden Ring tend to run better on Steam Deck than they do on hardware that's actually more powerful than the Steam Deck. But no matter what Valve's next hardware is, I'm 100% sure I will be picking it up, if for no other reason than Steam is where most of my games live, and new hardware that gives me a better way to access those games is always going to be something that piques my interest. Stay rad, everyone.